Let's open Unity. Name our project quiz game. Set it for the 2D template. Set our windows to 2x3. First, let's create a scripts folder, a prefabs folder, delete the sample scene, create a game scene, create a menu screen scene, create a persistent scene, remove the camera from the persistent scene, create a new game object, call it data controller, then we need to add a C# script for our data controller. Add another C# script called answer data. Now we open MonoDevelop, paste in the code for answer data. We make answer data serializable so we can access it in the editor. We add a string answer text to hold the answer, and a bool is correct to say if the answer is correct or not. Alright, next we're going to create another script. We're going to call it question data. Let's open up that script in MonoDevelop. Paste in the code. We have a string called question text to hold the question, and we have an array of answer data called answers to hold the answers for the question. Alright, let's quickly save all our work and close MonoDevelop. Alright, next we create another C# script to hold our round data. Let's paste in the code for our round data. We have a string name to hold our name for the round. We have a public int time limit in seconds, which is the time available for the round. A public int points added for correct answers to hold the points for each correct answer. And an array of questions with question data for the round. Let's save our code. Next, let's open up the data controller class in MonoDevelop. Let's paste in our code for the data controller class. We add an array of round data which will hold all the questions and answers and more information for each round. We add a call to don't destroy on load and pass in a game object so our data persists through all our scenes. Then we use the scene manager to load the menu screen. Then we add a method get current round data which returns the round data. We use the 0 index of the array because we only have one round in this example. Alright, let's open up our build settings. First we add the persistent scene, then the menu screen, then we add the game scene. Select the menu scene screen, and then change the background for the main camera to red. And let's run our application. The persistent scene will load with no camera, which we'll call the menu screen, which will have a red background. Select our data controller game object. We added the data controller script to it, and then we can start adding data to it. The size for our rounds, we have one round in total. We name our round round 1. Give it a time limit of 30 seconds. For each round, we give it 10 points. Now we have to add our array of questions. We add 3 questions. Set our question text to what do Ninja Turtles eat. We have 2 answers for that question. Pizza is one answer. That is the correct answer. Another answer could be fruit, which is the wrong answer, so we don't check the checkbox. Let's add another question. Which animal has 4 legs? Let's give that a size of 2, so 2 answers. Could be a chicken, could be a dog. The dog is the correct answer, so we check correct answer. Let's add another question. How many seconds are in a minute? Initialize our array to 3. For 3 answers, 45 seconds, 1 second, and the correct answer, 60 seconds. And check the checkbox for the correct answer for 60 seconds. Let's save the project. Next, let's open our menu screen, and we're going to add a UI object, a button to our menu screen. A canvas was automatically created for us. Move this button up into the scene. We can center it by entering our rect transform, setting our position X to 0, our position Y to 0. Select the text of the button and type in the text start to make it display start. Let's add another text object to the screen. Let's center our text object. Set position X to 0, position Y to 0. And then drag it up slightly. We can set the text in the editor to quiz game. Then we can select the color picker and change the color to white. And then increase the font size to 40. Expand the box so we can see the text. Center it again. Setting position X to 0 and Y to 100 so it's above our button. We can also center the text horizontally and vertically. Let's move that label a little closer to the button, setting Y position to 75. Alright, let's test it out. So here's our menu screen with a quiz game label and a start button. Alright, let's close that. Let's add another game object. Create empty game object and call it menu screen controller. Let's add a component to that game object, also called menu screen controller. This will be a new C# script. We can select that script and put it in our scripts folder for now. Then go into our folder and let's edit the menu screen controller script. I'm going to paste some code in for the menu screen controller. This class has a custom function to be called by the start button called start game, which uses the scene manager to load the game scene. We can drag over our menu screen controller object onto our button. Next, let's open up the drop-down menu to add a function from our menu screen controller class. Start game is the method that we added to the class that will navigate us to the actual game. Here's the game running. Let's click start. Now we're at the game scene. Alright, let's close out of that. Let's select scenes, go to our game scene, and then we're going to add a panel to our game scene. This panel will be the background for our display. Let's call it question panel. Let's change the color of the question panel to green. Let's add another game object to our question panel. We'll use a text object. Call it question display. Change the color to white. Center the text. Add some text. Question text. Next, we can stretch out the rectangle transform for the question display. Move the top variable up for the transform and the bottom up for the transform. Then we can stretch our text around the transform by setting left to 0 and right to 0, and then setting top to 0 and then bottom to 0 to make it stretch for the entire transform. Then we increase our font size to 40 so you can see the text better. Squish in the rectangle a little bit from the sides. We can set left to 50 and right to 50. Let's add another game object. Go to UI, add another panel. We're going to call this panel Answer Panel. It will hold all the answers. We're going to move this rectangle's transform down below the question text. Then we can remove the image component from this panel as we won't be needing it. We set the top to 0. Everything else is 0, so the panel is fully stretched out to fit the rect transform. Let's add some margin to both sides of that panel. Add some margin to the bottom of the panel. You can set it to 30. You set the top back to 0. Next, we'll add a component to our answer panel. Go to Layout. And we will add a vertical layout group. Set the width and the height of the child control size. Next, we'll add a game object to the answer panel. Let's add a button to the answer panel. Let's center that button on the panel. Alright, so let's add another button to the panel. Since we're using the vertical layout group, every button that we add resizes the buttons in the group. Then when we delete a button, they also resize. We can rename that button to Answer Button as it will be holding our answers. And we can update the size of the text of the button. Select Canvas, and let's add another panel to the canvas. We can rename that panel to UI. Set the rect transform to the top of the screen. Remove the image component. Let's add another game object to our UI. Go to UI, go to text. We added some text to our UI panel. Just change that text to time display. Then we're going to position it into the top right corner. So we move our rect transform into the top right corner. And set our position X and position Y to 0. Let's change the font size of our time display to 20. Let's change the color of our time display to white. Let's set our initial text to time equal to 0. We can move our rect transform down a bit and set top equal to 0 to move our text down slightly. We set the bottom to 0 as well. Let's select our time display game object and duplicate that object. Now we have two text objects. Let's rename this text object to score display. And we can move that down slightly to be below our time display. And then we can change the name from time to score. Next, we'll duplicate our question panel. Rename it to round over panel for the round over scene. Let's open up the round over panel. Remove the answer panel from the round over panel as we won't be needing it. Let's change the color of the round over panel to be purple so we can tell the difference. Set our alpha to 255 so we don't see through the panel. Let's change the question text on the panel to round over as this is the display for round over. Let's add another game object to our round over panel. Go to UI and add a button. We're going to rename that button to menu button. Let's go to the text on the menu button. And then let's change the text from button to menu. Let's collapse our round over panel and drag UI under the round over panel so we can see it. Now our time and score is displayed. Let's click back onto the round over panel. We can turn it on and off. Now let's add another game object. Create game object. We're going to call it game controller. Then we'll create another game object. And we're going to call that answer button object pool. Let's go back to scripts and let's add a new script. Create C# script and we're going to call it simple object pool. Let's open up the script and model develop and paste in our code. An object pool is for reusing objects instead of reinitializing them. We have a public game object called prefab that the object pool returns an instance of. We create a stack to hold our inactive prefabs or game objects. We have a method getObject which returns a game object, aka a prefab. Create a local variable spawned game object of type game object. We will look at our stack and see if there's any inactive game objects. If there are, we will set our spawn game object to the inactive object that we popped off our stack. Otherwise, we have to instantiate a new prefab and set it to the spawn game object. And then we add the pool object component to the prefab so we know this object is coming from this pool. Next, we'll set this object to active and then return the spawn game object. When an object is no longer in use, we can return it to the pool using the return object method. We pass in the object to return to the pool. We check to see if it has the pool object component that we added earlier. If it does, then we set the instance to inactive and then we add it to our pool. Otherwise, it's not part of the pool and we simply destroy the object. And then finally we have our object pooled object, which is a component that simply identifies the pool that a game object came from. Next, let's select our answer button object pool and add a component to our object pool. And that component will be the script we just created, simple objects pool script. Let's expand our canvas. Let's expand question panel, expand answer panel. Click on the answer button. And we can add a component to the answer button. Let's add the answer button script to the answer button. Let's click on our assets folder and click on the answer button script. Open that up in Mono Develop. Highlight everything and paste in some code. We have a public property text called answer text to display text, a private property answer data to store the answer instance, and a method called setup that takes in answer data and sets it up for display. Setting our data to our private instance of answer data, and then taking the data that we passed in that's set to answer data and taking the answer text from that and setting that to the public answer text property. So here's our answer button. Here's the text property on the answer button. And here's our script attached to the answer button. Let's drag the text onto the script where it says answer text. Now select our answer button and drag it over to the prefabs folder so it will be used as a prefab now. Next we select answer button object pool. Then we can grab our answer button prefab and drag it onto the prefabs property. Now we no longer need our answer button, so we can go ahead and delete that. Alright, let's go to our game controller and add a component to our game controller. Add a new script called game controller. Let's edit that script in Mono Develop. The game controller has a question display text, score display text, time remaining display text, simple object pool, answer button pool, answer button parent, question display, round end display, data controller, current round data, question pool is round active, time remaining, question index, player score, and a list of game objects for the answer button game object. When we start our scene, we can find a data controller because when we start our scene, we start with a persistent scene which has a data controller. Once the data controller is loaded, we can initialize the game variables with the data that we found, get current round data, get the questions, the time in seconds, and update the remaining display. Then we can initialize game data player score to 0 and question index to 0, and then we can show our first question and set the round active to true. Here's our show question method. It first removes old answers and gets the current question and displays the text. So remove the old answer buttons. We get the current question from the current question index. Next, we get all answers for the questions, create buttons for each, and then add them to the answer button parent object, aka the answer panel. Next, we get a reference to the answer button, then use its attached script to set the answer. So, give the game object an answer button component, and then pass in the answer. Here we have a button to remove the answer buttons and send them back into the object pool to be used again. Next, we have a method for when the answer button is clicked. Increase the player's score if the answer is correct and update the display. Otherwise, if we have more questions, show the next question, otherwise end the round. We do that by using our show question method, otherwise use our end round method. Here's our end round method. In this method, we set the round to be over, then we turn off our question display, and then we turn on our round end display. We also have a return to menu method that simply returns the menu screen, an update time remaining display, which simply updates the time remaining display at the top of the screen. And while the game is running, we call the update method, which checks if the round is active. If the round is active, then we decrement from the time and update the display. Otherwise, if there's no time left, then we must end the round. Answer button must also be updated. We add a reference to our game controller. We find the game controller and then we set it to our reference to our game controller. And then we also add a handle click method, which calls our game controller's answer button click method and passes if the answer is correct or not. Let's set the game objects on our game controller now. Question display on question display text. Answer button object pool on the answer button object pool. Answer panel on the answer button parent. Score display on score display text, time display on time remaining display text, the question panel on question display, round over panel on round end display. Next, let's go to prefabs and go to our answer button. Let's add an on click event to our answer button. Let's drag our answer button script onto the on-click event, and then select the handle click event. Next, let's go to the menu button on the round over panel. Add a click event and grab the game controller object and add it to the click event. Go to the drop-down menu, select the return to main menu method. Let's move our answer button script and our game controller script into our script folder. Now we can select our persistent scene and start our game. Here we have it, quiz game, start the game. Here's our question with 2 answers. Select some answers. And round over. We got 2 answers correct, so we got 20 points. Start the round again by clicking back with the main menu button. Let's start the game. Now let's let the timer run out. We should come back to the round over screen, which we do as time's at 0. And that's a quick run through of the Unity quiz game.